Senator Joni Ernst. Is she a gun rights champion or a gun rights fraud? Watch this video and you decide. Hey guys, Aaron Dorr here with Iowa gun owners. In the wake of the Maine shooting, gun control is all over the news again. It's the top agenda item, the way it seems, in the Biden White House. And for a lot of gun owners who have been able to sit back and take it easy for a while, a lot of you are asking the question, what's going to happen in the fight for gun rights in Washington, D.C. coming up? And more exactly, where exactly do our senators, Chuck Grassley and Joni Ernst, stand, and how hard will they fight to defend our gun rights? It's a fact of life for a lot of gun owners. This is kind of a cyclical situation because the gun control issue is not front page headline news every single day like it is right now. And so it's kind of interesting that in that context about the backdrop being Maine, the mass shooting, and now Biden's push for gun control, that Senator Joni Ernst is trumpeting a recent award she got from a national gun rights organization, calling her the legislator of the year. So we're going to talk about this because a lot of you remember, if you've been around for a long time here with Iowa gun owners, you remember way back in the day when she was a state senator, we would talk to you about Joni Ernst, how she was working with us actively to shut down gun control when Senate Democrats controlled that chamber, and she was an ally to gun owners way back in the day. But that is not the same Joni Ernst that we are dealing with now that she's in Washington, D.C. And I want to be clear on this for anybody who says that we are just attacking her because we like to attack Republicans. Our organization's members, you guys who are watching this, you gave us the resources we had to have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on digital ads and I believe radio ads in her reelection campaign against Teresa Greenfield, highlighting exactly how terrible on guns Teresa Greenfield was. We went out of our way to educate Iowans on the impact of that race and what would happen if Teresa Greenfield was our next United States Senator. So check yourself if you're trying to question our motives on this video. So the backdrop, I already mentioned that. And so now what's funny is that Alan Gottlieb with the Second Amendment Foundation has come out and he has recently declared Joni Ernst to be the pro-gun legislator of the year. And of course, traditionally, Joni Ernst is trumpeting this endorsement as loudly as she can, making sure everybody knows that a national gun rights organization has declared her the big heavy in the fight for gun rights, the fight to stop Joe Biden's war against our freedoms in Washington, D.C. It's a very old game. It's a very old game. Moderate or corrupt or weak or backstabbing gun rights organizations like to promote backstabbing politicians. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. In the case of the Second Amendment Foundation, it was Alan Gottlieb way back in the Manchin-Toomey fight of 2013, where we almost lost our assault weapons on the Senate floor, who was brokering a deal with Joe Manchin and Pat Toomey from West Virginia and Pennsylvania to pass universal background checks. And it was Alan Gottlieb who said, well, we have to do this to avoid losing more ground. So this organization cannot be trusted at all. And so it's only natural that they stand up there and sing the praises of legislators who cannot be trusted at all. It's an old game, both in D.C. and right here in Iowa. So Alan Gottlieb says, and I have a couple quotes here on my other screen. I'll read them for you. He says, we have watched Senator Ernst in action, and she is truly a Capitol Hill leader when it comes to protecting the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding citizens, not just in Iowa, but across the country, says Chairman Alan Gottlieb. The environment for gun owners under the current administration has required politicians to stand up for honest gun owners. But Senator Ernst has become a standout champion on Second Amendment issues. Gun owners in Iowa can be rightfully proud of the work that she has been doing, and gun owners across the map can be thankful that Joni Ernst is solidly in their corner. So it's pretty high praise. Pretty high praise. So some of you may remember and maybe scratching your heads right now and saying, man, I remember last year, I thought that Joni Ernst screwed us, but this is pretty high praise. Maybe I'm having a memory lapse. You're not. You're not. And that's what we're about to break down here for you And anybody else who was watching this video, if you want to know the details about Senator Joni Ernst, what was the phrase here? Standout champion status on Second Amendment issues, here's some information for you. Let me back you up here. I'm going to back you guys up mentally. This is February of 2022. So you're talking over a year and a half ago now. Joe Biden has been maintaining a nonstop war against the Second Amendment. He's pushing for an assault weapons ban, so-called national gun registry, national red flag law legislation, the whole package. And in that interim, he's looking for little wins any way he can get them. And one of those was the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act of 2022. Now, VAWA, as we're going to refer to it, might sound on the surface like pretty good idea. No one likes violence against women. Everyone wants people that commit violence against women to be held accountable, to face justice. So why would we ever be opposed to that? Well, as always, the proof is in the pudding. And the pudding, when it comes to VAWA, was stacked full of gun control. Stacked full of gun control. The bill number, and you can look it up for yourself, this is in 2022, was S3623. And the bill then eventually got tucked into a budget bill and renumbered in the House, and it became referred to as HR 2471. Okay. So we're talking about S3623 and HR 2471. Again, not from this Congress, from 2022. So if you're looking it up online, make sure you have the right year. But you don't have to take my word for this. Joni Ernst loudly and proudly told the world that she was going to stand up alongside of the most aggressive gun grabbers in the entire United States Senate to help ram this bill through by giving it that bipartisan cover that Chuck Schumer and Senate Democrats want so bad. The screenshot right here. This is from the late Senator Feinstein's website. Feinstein, Ernst, Durbin, Murkowski agree on bipartisan language to reauthorize VAWA. Now, just look at this screenshot. Anytime you see Senator Ernst's name in connection with Dianne Feinstein, Dick Durbin, Lisa Murkowski, you know it's a disaster. You know that our freedoms are going to suffer. And that's exactly what happened in VAWA reauthorization. Well, it's a huge bill, no question. And there was, I'm sure, some good things in there. But the problem is the gun control was part of that package, and Joni Ernst knew it full damn and good well. One of the things it did was require a criminal report be generated by the FBI anytime an American citizen failed a NICS check. What is a NICS check? Some of you might be asking. If you go to buy a firearm at a gun store, retailer, any FFL dealer, you're going to go through a NICS check to see if you pass the background check to buy a firearm. And NICS, the system, the NICS system fails all the time. And what I mean by that is it will false deny people based on countless factors. Maybe you have the same last name as a guy on, some terrorist watch list. Maybe your birth date is the same as some mass murderer. For whatever the reason, false positives are a reoccurring problem with the NICS system. And in fact, reports from the feds, I'm reading right here on my other screen, show that 94% of gun denials in the NICS system are false positives. 94%. Despite that, Joni Ernst voted for this bill, which requires that a law enforcement report be generated by NICS and sent to local law enforcement, requiring them to investigate it every single time an American citizen fails a NICS check. So what does that look like in real life? You're a gun owner in Iowa City, not exactly, a big fan of gun owners. You go to a gun store or a gun show to buy a firearm. You fail a NICS check. Maybe you leave. Maybe you try again in 20 minutes and you pass, whatever. The FBI's NICS system will now generate a criminal report to local law enforcement, and they will now be tasked with investigating this alleged criminal offense. Even though she knows, and we all know, that 94% of these denials are false positives. So not only are we wasting law enforcement's time, much more importantly, you're putting gun owners under the microscope, knowing this is all BS. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. She knew better. She knew better, and she flaunted this in our faces. Number two, though, it had new language that allowed state and local prosecutors to be deputized as part-time United States attorneys and part-time ATF agents to carry out the enforcement of this language. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm assuming that you're not a big fan of Joe Biden using Iowa cops, Iowa county attorneys, Iowa troopers, Iowa deputies to enforce his gun control agenda. I'm just assuming that. And the problem that we have above everything else in red states like Iowa right now is, while our legislature is pretty solid on these issues, the federal government is a nonstop, ever-growing leviathan that wants to consume our states. And as part of that, they want to assume control of our law enforcement. That's why states across the country are putting safeguards in place to make sure that can't happen. But Joni Ernst went the exact opposite direction. She's allowing VAWA and all the money contained in it, your money, my money, our taxpayer dollars, to be used to then take law enforcement and county attorneys and make them into part-time feds to prosecute Biden's war against gun owners. So if you fail that NICS check, it's not going to be your Clay County Sheriff's Department that comes and knocks on your door. It's going to be a guy in a Clay County uniform who's actually an ATF agent for purposes of this investigation. Now, maybe Clay County is a bad example. I was born in Spencer, so that's a county I reference in videos. Pretty red county, pretty red area. But maybe you're in Johnson County. Maybe you're in the quads somewhere. It's not going to be your local cop. He's going to be a deputized ATF agent. And if something goes wrong, your county attorney is going to be a part-time United States attorney using federal dollars in federal cases, federal charges against gun owners. The last thing we need is to have our state and local government be taken over by federal authorities. And that's what Joni Ernst rammed into law with VAWA. Again, look it up for yourself. It's S3623. That was the Senate version. That's the one that she bragged about with that press conference with Dianne Feinstein. The language was then rolled into a House version, HR 2471. And this is a great picture of Senator Ernst bragging about what she did and bragging about who she did it with when VAWA was passed. Check out this photograph. What do you see here? You've got Joni Ernst, obviously, on the right. You've got Susan Collins, one of the most backstabbing Republicans in the country right now. Then who do you got? You got Dick Durbin. Senator Durbin from Illinois is the hatchet man right now for Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden working to pass gun control. Then you have, of course, Dianne Feinstein, who is no longer with us. Then you have Lisa Murkowski, another Republican backstabbing traitor who's been actively working against our gun rights for her entire career. Yeah, I'm not sure what more to say about this. Anytime I see someone like Joni Ernst in a company of people like this, it's a problem. It's a problem. Does she have to be, painting her face William Wallace blue and spitting in their eye every day in the Senate floor? No, of course not. But if you're going to take our freedoms so lightly as to sit there and join gun grabbers like this who hate the Second Amendment, that's a real problem for Iowa gun owners. And that was just the first one. 2022 was a bad year for Joni. Let me tell you, that was just the first one. The big fight, the big betrayal came just a couple months later. You guys remember this, right? The Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. This was Biden's massive gun control law that he actually got signed into law last year. And it was possible because 15 Republican senators crossed over, screwed gun owners, and stood with Chuck Schumer and Joe Biden. Chuck Grassley didn't do it. I want to be clear on that. The kind of folks that did, Lindsey Graham, we all know what a backstabbing weasel Lindsey Graham is, Mitt Romney, And how about that? Thank God for the news that Mitt Romney's not going to run for re-election again. Lisa Murkowski, who I mentioned a moment ago, Susan Collins, again, backstabbing rhino traders, and our own Joni Ernst. Chuck Schumer couldn't have passed this. It wouldn't have got on Joe Biden's desk if the Republican conference held fast and said, no, we're not going to vote for this. That bipartisan cover is so important. That is what enabled this bill to pass. Hell, they put it in the name of the law, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. This was S2928. S2928. This retained that bill number all through the process. You can look it up right now. Again, make sure you check the right year. This was 2022, not 2023. So make sure you get the right number if you look it up. This is what this legislation did. This is what your and my Senator Joni Ernst, this is what she did to us. She voted for this bill knowing that it allocated $750 million to the federal government to use to incentivize. Incentivize. It's a fancy word. What it really means is bribe state legislatures like ours into passing red flag gun seizures. $750 million of our money set aside, given to Merrick Garland, our Attorney General, to use in trying to bribe red state legislatures into passing red flag gun seizures. We've already received here in Iowa $4.25 maybe million of that money. We all know what a red flag law is, right? Red flag laws allow someone to claim you're dangerous and ask a judge to order the confiscation of your firearms before you've ever been charged, arrested, or convicted of anything. It's the end of due process. It's the end of the ideal that we're innocent until proven guilty. And Joni Ernst stood there with Chuck Schumer, Dianne Feinstein, people like that, and she voted for this. This is unforgivable stuff. This wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. And she bragged about it in her presser after the fact. She says that, well, this is a good form of red flag gun seizures. There is due process in here. And what she means by that is they have removed the ex parte provision requirement in the language. That means that people have to let you show up in court to defend yourself during these red flag seizure hearings. So in Joni's mind, that makes it all okay. Makes it all okay. That's ridiculous. No charges, no arrest, no conviction. And yet we're going to take away someone's firearms. You would literally have more, you do literally have more due process rights right now if you run a red light in Urbandale than if you have your gun rights being attacked in a court of law. If you run a red light, you can get a jury trial. If you want a red light, you can have a lawyer appointed at government expense to defend you. You can appeal these things. When it comes to red flag gun seizures, thanks to Joni Ernst, before you've ever set foot in a courtroom, your guns are gone or could be gone if they ever pass it in the legislature here in Des Moines. That wasn't all. She imposed with S2928 a blanket 10-day waiting period on minors. What they actually mean are adult citizens aged 18 to 21 who want to buy firearms. 10-day waiting period on certain types of firearm sales that has already been ruled to be unconstitutional. We've had federal court judge after federal court judge after federal court judge already come out and say that waiting periods are inherently unconstitutional. These are 18-year-old adults that can die for our country. The idea that we're going to tell them you can die for our country, but you can't own an AR-15 is absurd and it's unconstitutional. And federal court judges have already held that to be the case. This wasn't passed by Chuck Schumer. It was passed by Joni Ernst. What else is in here? A lot of bad stuff. It also redefines a straw purchase to include someone who you should have known would use the firearm in a hostile intent, with hostile intent. What does that mean? Well, currently, if you know somebody is a prohibited person and you transfer a firearm to them, you are liable because you know they're prohibited and you gave them a firearm. This expands that now, and it includes anybody that you should have known was prohibited. Well, what does that exactly mean? How do we exactly define that? That's a great question. And unfortunately, it's going to be United States attorneys working for Merrick Garland and Joe Biden who decide the answer to that question. It's wide open for abuse. Wide open for abuse. So if your next door neighbor gets into a situation, what's an example? He works in an insurance agency downtown. He works 801 grand. He has an embezzlement charge against him. He's keeping it super hush hush. You don't know about it. You do couples dinners, you and the spouse, him and his spouse. You go out to eat. You're friends. You've been neighbors for decades. And he actually has an indictment against him by a grand jury. He's facing felony charges. He can't own a firearm now. He's under an indictment pending felony charges. But if you don't know any of that, and you want to go out pheasant hunting with him, and he borrows your shotgun, you are now facing federal gun charges. And if you might think that sounds sensational, that's exactly what U.S. attorneys do all day long. They find people who make innocent mistakes when it comes to gun issues. Under this administration, they have been tasked with going after us with everything they've got. And Joni Ernst, instead of standing in the gap for us, made this crap possible. What else? They added mental health records from schools to the prohibited persons database. Now, you might think to yourself, look, if someone's, a psycho, I don't want that person carrying a gun. Well, no kidding. But what does that mean? And how do we define this? You see, the problem with mental health gun control has always been the difference between declaration and adjudication. What does that mean? Well, if someone's adjudicated defective, that means they've been in court. They had all of their due process rights available to them, lawyers, confronting witnesses, the appellate process, the whole 9 yards. And so if you're adjudicated defective, you've been in court, you've gone through the entire process, and you've been adjudicated to be defective and prohibited. But if you've been declared prohibited, declared mentally prohibited, that means that an individual doctor, an individual psychologist, an individual shrink has talked to you and said, I don't think you should have a gun. And that is where we have tremendous room for abuse. The AMA and basically every medical entity, association out there today is hostily opposed to our gun rights. Look it up for yourself. They all have position papers on this. Heck, they lobby in Des Moines sometimes against our gun rights. So we're going to allow a doctor to simply snap his fingers or her fingers, and declare you prohibited without being adjudicated. You're simply declared. That's a problem. And now take that and apply it to the situation here. So a school's prohibited person status against a student will now be added into the federal database. So if your daughter is in 7th grade and let's say that she, her boyfriend dumped her, right? Doesn't know why. She's a mess. She had a great big math exam. She bombed it. She actually got a B plus. She was gearing for an A plus, so she bombed it, right? One of those kind of girls. And, she gets it back and she lays her head in her desk and she's like, what's the point anymore? In a statement of obvious emotional frustration, typical with young people in these very emotive phases of life, a purple-haired teacher could listen to that statement made by your daughter, your granddaughter, and say, oh my gosh, she wants to commit an act of self-harm. I can't even say some of the words these days. We'll get yanked off of YouTube and yanked off of Facebook. She wants to commit an act of self-harm. Oh my gosh. And she refers her to the purple-haired or pink-haired school nurse, school psychologist, school shrink, whatever. And they talk to your daughter and she's like, yeah, I had a horrible day. My boyfriend dumped me. I bombed this test. What's the point? What's the point? And your 12 or 13-year-old daughter, who has no idea what she's involved in that conversation, just used a phrase that a teacher or a doctor or a school nurse with an axe to grind against gun owners could use to say, oh boy, she wants to harm herself or she wants to harm somebody else. We're going to call her prohibited. And that information goes into NICS. She's not even an adult. She's not even an adult. As a child, her 12-year-old utterance in school could be used against her. This is insane. This is Minority Report level garbage. Joni Ernst should be standing up for girls, right? That's her big thing. She stands up for women. Well, where were you for all the women, or in this case, girls, who were counting on you to make sure that some leftist doctor, nurse, school teacher did not screw them over for a lifetime? Ridiculous. Finally, S2928 expanded the list of folks who could be disarmed under the Lautenberg Amendment. You guys all know what Lautenberg means. If you have a domestic violence conviction or protective order, you may not own firearms. If you have a conviction, you may never own firearms again. And that is already a problem. We'll just say it. We have no problem saying it. Lautenberg must be repealed because Lautenberg does not require any actual act of physical violence. Let me say it again. A Lautenberg violation does not actually require any act of physical violence. Non-physical contact can get you charged, can get you convicted, can get you a Lautenberg tag and leave you prohibited for a lifetime. And what Joni Ernst has expanded that to include a bunch of additional non-violent misdemeanor crimes. And you might say to yourself, dude, I mean, if they're going to commit misdemeanor crimes, they shouldn't carry guns anyway. Well, think hard about that. Because for our nation's entire history, felonies were always the threshold on when someone could or could not own a firearm. And if we let that slip and make it that we're okay with misdemeanors being used to disarm you and I, where does that end? Under the Joe Biden White House, where the heck does that end? What about President Gavin Newsom? Where does that end? Once we open Pandora's box like that, it is almost impossible to put our rights back in that situation. Joni Ernst knows all of this. Joni Ernst haughtily and arrogantly and contemptfully voted for all of this, and she bragged about it online. So you guys can decide for yourself. When the national gun rights organizations who do nothing here in Iowa call Joni Ernst a gun rights champion, hard to sit there and not scratch your head. The truth is that Joni Ernst has screwed us over time and time and time again. She has sided with Dianne Feinstein. She has sided with Dick Durbin. Ultimately, she has sided with Joe Biden, giving him the bipartisan cover he had to have to pass the nation's first gun control bill through Congress in almost 30 years just last year. The damage that bill, that law alone will cause is almost impossible to quantify. And for that, Joni Ernst should apologize to you. She should apologize to me and every other gun owner here in Iowa. So guys, curious as to your thoughts, hit the comment section below, whether you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, Telegram, any of our platforms, and let us know, what do you think? Are you pleased with Joni Ernst? Do you believe she's done a good job fighting for gun owners in Washington, D.C., or are you disgusted with her repeated acts of betrayal? Guys, sound off in the comment section. As always, we'll keep you informed. Stay free.